In this video, we are going to talk about parcelables. So, if you recall, our user details class and our message class both implement parcelable, this interface right here. And I said it was necessary for them to implement parcelable so that we could write some of our activities, but we haven't ran into a case yet where they're needed to be properly implemented, so we've left their methods blank. So if you remember, back, for example, in my user details, I have these two methods, these two override methods that are required because I implement parcelable, and they're blank. And I also have this weird creator thing, and that's also blank. So what is it? Put simply, the parcelable API is simply a way to do binary serialization of data. So Google basically wrote their own sort of serialization framework that Android understands and knows about, and that can be used in pretty much anywhere Android expects data, like, for example, in an extra or in an intent. We've already seen examples of this being done. For example, my add contact activity. Remember how we have this result contact field, which is used to extract the contact that was added, and you notice all the way down here we use it by saying intent put extra selected user. Now what is selected user? What is this field? Well, it's a user details, and it's a custom class, basically, is the point I'm trying to make. And you'll notice that if I hit Control P here and look at all these overloads, the one that's selected is the one that takes in a parcelable. So you're seeing a list right here of all the different things, all the different kinds of data that a intent or a bundle can have. And so we see we have our basic data types, our booleans, chars, shorts, longs, whatever. We have our basic reference types like our string and character sequence. We have our parcelable and parcelable array. We also have some other reference types such as serializable and other arrays. But the point is that what's going on here is the kinds of data that's going to be allowed to be transferred in an intent or a bundle has to implement or be one of those types. And in this case, it's going to be a parcelable. So you would have noticed, if you know much about, or if you played much or played with Java enough, you would have noticed that in that list of overloads there was a way of saving data that related to a serializable. So if you have a serializable type, then you can also save it. So why would Google invent their own serialization framework over using serializable? If you're not familiar with Java, if a class implements serializable, that allows that class to be serialized natively by Java itself, and the serialization for serializable classes happens pretty transparently, and it's super convenient. But it's not necessarily the best choice for Android, and here's why. These intents, for example, that we have, and also bundles. Remember bundles all the way back when we were talking about activity life cycles? The bundles that kind of stick around and are used to destroy and recreate an activity. These bundles and these intents are saved in memory, and they're used to recreate activities. For example, you see right here that in this intent, I'm shoving extra data into it. I'm shoving my selected user into it. Well, let's say that this activity is finished. Now his intent is sent back into the activity that invoked it. Now let's say that the user, the person holding his phone, hits the home button. So we have this activity that's alive in our application, and it has this intent with this extra data in it, but the user doesn't cancel out of the application. He hits the home button on his phone to go to his home screen, or maybe he swipes over to another application or something. And then maybe at some point, Android is going to need to reclaim the memory that your app is taking because the user is no longer using that app. So what might happen is the Android operating system might kill your app, and so your app it's still considered to be running from the user's perspective, but from the operating perspective, its memory is reclaimed. So now let's say the user comes back to your application. So at this point, the activity has to be recreated. How does it get recreated? Well, through a combination of intents and bundles. What I'm implying here is that intents and bundles are saved in either memory on the Android device itself, or they're saved on your storage. Now, in a mobile situation, both RAM and storage is a very limited resource. And the nice thing about parcelables is that they're very compact. Compared to serialization, Java serialization, the parcelables are more compact, and they're also faster. So CPU is another resource that you have to consider when working in a mobile application. Parcelables it's a binary serialization format and happens very, very quickly compared to Java serializable. So basically, all it comes down to is, or most of what it comes down to is, that Google created this serialization framework in order to facilitate fast and compact serialization at the expense of additional complexity. So because of the way that the Parcelable works, we have to kind of go in and we have to set up our own, we have to basically do the serialization more or less manually. But that's okay, because we don't have a whole lot of things we need to serialize, and it's worth the performance and memory consumption trade-off. But anyway, I use parcelables in any time that I have a complex object that needs to be stuffed into an intent or into a bundle. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to convert message.java and userdetails.java into implementing their parcelableness. And it turns out that it's actually incredibly easy to do. We have 2 points that we need to consider. 2 primary points that we need to consider. The other methods are kind of ancillary. The write to parcel method is responsible for saving data, and the create from parcel is responsible for reading data. So what we see right here is when this user details object needs to be saved, when any object of this class needs to be saved, notice what's going to happen is the write to parcel method is going to be invoked, and it's going to pass in this little parcel called dest. I personally am not a big fan of that, so we can change this to something like destination, for example. Make that a little bit clearer. I don't like shorthand and parameter names. It really irritates me. Anyway, so the parcel right here, this parcel destination, if I go ahead and I open up its autocomplete, it might become a little clearer what is going on here. Notice how we have these read stuff. We don't worry about that right now. Look at all these write things. So basically, this parcel is, well, it's just that. It's a parcel. It's this little packet of data that can be written to and read from. And anything we write to it gets written into a binary stream, basically. Now, the implementation of these methods are hidden behind a native interface, so the parcel API is actually written probably in C++ at the low level, but this is kind of a Java wrapper around it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. All we have to really worry about doing is inside of our write to parcel method, write all our fields to our destination. Inside of our creator, our create from parcel, read all of our fields from the source. Now, order is important. Because this is a binary data stream, we need to write everything in proper order. So let's just go ahead and do it. The user details, it's not that complex of a class. Let's go ahead and implement the write to parcel method real fast. So basically, it's just going to be destination.write int id. Destination.write boolean is contact, or write boolean, not boolean array. Destination.write string display name, destination.write string username, and destination.write string avatar URL. It's not write boolean, it's probably write bool, isn't it? Oh, come on. Oh, right. I can't believe I forgot that. Actually, I always forget it this every single time, and that's why I'm going to leave it in the video, because hopefully you will learn this lesson better than I have, which is there is no write boolean method on the parcel. It seems like a silly omission, doesn't it? That a boolean is a fairly straightforward type that you would expect to be able to read and write from, but for whatever reason you can't. And basically the way that we do work around this instead is we write byte instead. So I'm going to say write byte, and then I'm going to open a ternary and say 1, 0. So basically all this is saying is, oh right, there's no implicit conversion between byte literals, isn't there, in Java? My C# is showing again. Okay, let's go ahead and cast this to a byte after we go ahead and do that. Okay, so that is the correct code. Bit of a pain. But you have to do it that way. You have to go ahead, and I'm opening up ternary here, and I'm saying if is contact is true, write 1, otherwise write 0, then cast that into a byte. And that's all you do. So basically what's going to happen is when this object needs to be saved, this write to parcel method will be invoked, and then we're just stuffing it with a bunch of data. Now, no metadata comes along for the ride. This is just all straight up raw data being dumped into a stream. And so basically, that's why I was saying earlier that order is super important, because when we read from the parcel, we're going to have to read it back in the same order that we wrote it with. Okay, so let's go ahead and for the described contents, yeah, I honestly actually don't really know what this method does. Probably could go ahead and jump in the source code at some point and do a grep, but honestly I don't worry about it too much, because documentation literally says public abstract and described contents. Describe the kinds of special objects contained in this parcelable's marshaled representation. Returns a bit mask indicating the set of special objects marshaled by the parcelable. Yeah, if any of you guys can actually figure out what that means, send me an email. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the creator field. So the creator field is another unfortunate design decision of the parsable. I'm really not a big fan of this particular API, especially how, like, for example, for intents, there's one write method, and then they use typed overloads depending on what it is. Like, remember, like, you have this intent and you have a put extra method and it has an overload for each type, so you just have to say put extra. Well, why does it say write int write byte write string when it could have just done that? I don't know. But anyway, creator again is another unfortunate thing, because we're in a strongly typed language, yet this would be a runtime error if I didn't have this field. This field is kind of picked up by the whole parcelable stuff, and what it is it's a creator. So it's responsible for instantiating and basically deserializing the source parcel. This is the opposite of the write to parcel method. So what we get is we get a parcel, which is going to just be the same kind of object that we got the write to parcel, except for the difference is we're going to be using the read methods, the corresponding read methods, and we're going to be doing it in the proper order. Now, what I want to do here is, generally speaking, I want to go ahead and I'm going to create an overload from my user details and say source. So what I'm going to do is, for my user details, I'm going to instantiate it, and I'm going to accept a source parameter here. And that's going to be a parcel. Then I'm going to go up to the top of the file, and I'm going to create a private user details parcel. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating this new overloaded constructor, and it's going to be a private constructor. And the reason I'm doing it this way is I don't trust that the order in which the parameters of the constructor appear is going to necessarily be the order in which the parameters are written to in our write to parcel method. So I need to have a different constructor that can change the order in case the order ever no longer aligns. Like, for example, in this constructor right here, maybe we reorder a parameter, but we don't reorder it down here. Then I wouldn't be able to use this constructor for the parcelable. Well, why not? Maybe that would be a better thing to show you guys exactly what I mean. So I'm going to undo this real fast, because basically, without creating that additional constructor, this is what our code would look like. We would have source.readInt, and then we would have source.readByte equals 1, and source.readString, source.readString, source.readString. So this is what we would have, and this would work, obviously, because the order of the parameters are going to be executed from left to right. So this source.readInt will execute, which corresponds to this write int. This source.readByte will execute, that corresponds to that. That string will correspond to that string, and that string will correspond to that string, and so on. And if we look at the order of the parameters, it just so happens that they match up. But that necessarily will not always be the case. So you have a couple options. Maybe you want to write, and what I'm talking about here is, yes, the code would work now, but it would be perhaps more difficult to change in the future. The code would be less flexible and a little bit more annoying to work with. Now, you have a couple options. I could go ahead and do something like this: int id equals read or source read int, boolean, is contact equals, and so on and so on. And then I would go ahead and I would just pass those in right here. So I'd say id is contact, display name, username, and avatar URL. Obviously, I don't have these local variables created because this is just a a really quick demonstration of what I'm talking about here. Now, I could do that. This gives me flexibility to where if I switched up one of these parameters, I can have my the order that I read the values in be in the same be in a not coupled order than the way in which that they're passed into the constructor. I don't like that either. Because I don't know, it just seems a little gross. It seems a little repetitive. So the solution that I came up with, I think the most, I guess the more future-proof and explicit, yet not necessarily ridiculously long and long-winded solution is to simply create a constructor for our user details that accepts a parcel, because that'll allow our user details to decide inside of his constructor what order he wants to load things in. I think that's a better solution. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. This also will allow me to, one thing, I did know, I don't know why I didn't mark all these fields as final, but I could. So right now they're erroring out because this constructor isn't fully implemented. By marking them as final, which I think they should be in the first place, I don't know why I didn't do that before, that means they can only be set values inside of the constructor, which rules out having an additional method. So this solution of having the constructor take in a parcel, a private constructor take in a parcel, actually is better also because it allows us to use final fields. So now I can say id equals parcel read int, is contact equals parcel.readByte equals 1, display name equals parcel read string, and then we want to go ahead and do our username equals parcel read string and our avatar equals parcel read string. One more improvement that I can do to this code is I can take this this write to parcel, maybe move it above my described contents, and then move all of this to the top of the class. So now, not only do we have everything nice and encapsulated up here as far as the order of things, but these two methods, which are closely tied together, and if they're not implemented correctly could break, are now physically located closer in the file, and I really like that. I think that it cleans up the code quite a bit and makes it less prone to error. Anyway, that was a really long-winded discussion about code style, but I hope it made sense. Now let's go ahead and come down here to the creator, and let's finish the last method right here. So the last method is nothing more than returning a new array of size. That's it. So notice how it returns a user details array. It says new array, takes in a size. All we need to do is say return new user details of size. Probably a performance thing, because using reflection to instantiate objects or arrays in Java might be a little unperformant, and maybe there's no dynamic code compilation to cache that and make it faster. So seems a little odd. I can see where they're coming from requiring me to do this, but it does really seem a little ridiculous that you have to make sure that you go ahead and do that. And if you don't remember to implement this new array method, you will you'll have a bad time in the future when you try to save an array of something and it doesn't work. Okay, so now that we have that all down, let's jump into our message.java and basically do the same thing, because this is also parseable. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. I'm going to do my new array and my create from parcel first. So my new array, of course, is I replace that 0 with return new message of size. And my create from parcel is simply new message source. Now, of course, we don't have this constructor created yet, but we will. I'm working kind of bottom to top right now. Then I'm going to take the write to parcel method. I'm going to move it above described contents. We can actually do this with a keyboard shortcut in IntelliJ. Hold down Control Shift and use the up and down arrow keys on your keyboard. Now I want to take these two methods and move them to the top. So I'm going to select them, hit Control X, go all the way to the top, and I'll implement them right underneath the constructor. Let's go ahead and write our write to parcel method first. So first I'm going to change this. Or I could do this as out. Out isn't a bad name for that parameter. I just really don't like dest. That's just so gross. So out should be good. We're going to start off with write int id. For our created at is a calendar object. And a calendar object is really nothing more than a wrapper around the amount of milliseconds that have elapsed since the Unix epoch. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, in this case, write long, because we need 8 bytes for this particular value. I'm going to say write long, and I'm going to pass in created at dot get time in mils. millis. Another really... Every time I see millis, just like that dest thing, it's really gross. Anyway, that's how we're going to save our created at, because it's just a Unix timestamp, and we'll save it as a Unix timestamp, and then we'll reinstantiate it from that Unix timestamp when we deserialize. We can do out write byte, or actually write string. Short message. I'm gonna do the same order as the constructor just because that seems like a nice thing. But I want to point out that, like I said in the last section, it's not necessarily going to be the same thing, because there could be things that go in the constructor that aren't serialized or deserialized, or maybe there's something that's serialized and deserialized but doesn't come from the constructor. Oops. Write string. I don't know why I was writing longs there. And we can do image URL. Okay, this is actually a cool one right here. This dot other user equals other user. What is other user? He's a user details. So check this out. I can say out dot write parcelable. So you can actually kind of nest parcelables, which is really cool. So write parcelable other user, and for the flags, I'm just going to pass in 0. The flags have to do with the flags are another really odd thing. They have to do with basically it's one of the few things that you might want to pass into the flags is parseable write return value, and according to that, is the parseable that you're passing in is the return value that is the result of a function, which I would imagine many things are the return value as a result of the function at some point along the code. But yeah, it's kind of an oddly worded thing. If an Android engineer wants to get back on me on an explanation that makes sense, go ahead and email me again. Anyway, we'll just pass in 0. 0 seems to work just fine. Now let's gonna go ahead and do out dot. Let's see. So we did our other user. Now let's do our is from us. So write byte and cast a byte is from us. No, is from us with the variable. Question mark 0 or question mark 1:0 for our ternary. And then we'll say out write byte is read. So cast a byte and then is read. Oh, come on, stop that madness. All right, that's our write to parcel method. Now let's do our constructors. So I'm going to come up here and say private message parcel. I guess to be consistent, we can go ahead and say in right there. And let's go ahead and set this stuff up. So ID equals ID equals in dot read int and created at. Now for our created at, we want to instantiate a calendar object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to instantiate a new Gregorian calendar. And for this, you'll notice that there isn't an overload of its constructor that takes in milliseconds. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say created at dot set time in millis. Yeah, millis. Set time in millis, and then I'm going to pass in dot read long. After we do that, we can do our short message, which is our next thing. So short message equals ID dot or in dot read string, and we have our long message equals in. I really want to type in ID right there. I don't know why. And then we have our image URL, which is in.read string. And then we have our other user, which is going to be cast to user in.read parcelable. And it wants us to pass in a class loader. So in this case, I'm going to pass in user details.class.get class loader for that. And of course, by cast to user, I meant cast to user details. Then we're going to go ahead and say is from us equals in.read byte equals 1 and is read equals in.read byte equals 1. All right. Yeah, I think that's about it. We will have another parsable later that we have to write, and we'll probably just go through that really quickly at some point. But I think for this video, we're pretty much done. And we can go ahead and start moving on. All right, we'll see you guys in the next one.